You are living in a period which you should be glad of, in spite of all the troubles with it, of vast, sweeping change in the way we work and live and relate to each other and the rest of the world. At every hinge point in American history, we have a fight like we're having now. Our founders gave us a mission. Remember what they said our mission was? Our mission, they pledged their lives, their fortunes, their sacred honor to form a more perfect union. Now, that was both a humble statement and a bold statement. It was humble because they recognized that as flawed human beings, we will never be perfect. And as long as people are on the face of the earth, there will be problems. It was bold because it embodied the 18th century idea of progress. It could always be more perfect. So most of us who are Democrats and a lot of people who were part of the traditional Republican Party were sort of communitarian. They thought that we should work together because we could always do more together than we could apart, and we could always be more perfect. And whatever came along, whatever circumstances changed, whatever challenges presented themselves, whatever opportunities were there, we could become more perfect. But that requires us to believe in evidence over ideology, to test our ideas and our convictions against circumstances, and to measure them based on whether real people's lives are better or worse after we do whatever we say we want to do. But we always fight about this. At big times of change, they require us to define, defend, and expand the Union. Now, I'll just give you a couple of examples. The personal animosity which I engendered, maybe because there's just something about me they didn't like, and the kind of intensity, and by the way, the legalization of politics, putting everybody through the courts and all that, the time that most paralleled that in the history of our country was the beginning of the Republic. Because about all the American people agreed on was we didn't want to live under England's thumb anymore, and we wanted George Washington to be our first leader. That was it. And in Washington's second term, everybody realized he was on the way out the door, and nobody had really defined what it meant to be an American. The two big questions were we going to have a national economy, and were we going to have a national legal system? And they brutalized each other. The Washington and his crowd, and John Adams and Alexander Hamilton and John Marshall and his crowd, until we worked it out. Then we had 40 years of stability. Then we fought for another 25 years or more about the Union. If you got into the Union, could you get out if you didn't like what they were doing on slavery? If you join any other club, you can get out of it. I said it like that because it's self-evident now that Lincoln was right, but it wasn't at the time. What are we going to do about slavery? And if you join the Union, can you turn around and get out? From 1840 all through the Civil War, through Abraham Lincoln's death and Andrew Johnson's impeachment in a fight about what the Reconstruction would look like, we fought about it. It wasn't really resolved until Ulysses Grant was elected president in 1868. And then we had total calm for several decades. Then we became an industrial nation, not an agricultural nation. The cities exploded. New York got a whole new wave of immigrants from all across the world we never had before. And the question was, can you be a great industrial power with all these monopolistic entities like Standard Oil, unless you also have a great governmental power to ensure competition, protect natural resources from depletion, and ensure decency in the workplace and social justice? Theodore Roosevelt said, no, you can't. You got to have those things. When he left office, William Howard Taft said, nah, we're not for big government. That's how the Democrats became the Progressive Party in America. Woodrow Wilson got elected and took up the mantle that had belonged to the Republicans from Abraham Lincoln through Theodore Roosevelt. And for nearly a century, we've been the Progressive Party. But the role of government in the industrial age was arguably not resolved until the end of World War II. Because as soon as Wilson left office, we had 12 years of reaction, we had a depression, we had the Second World War. But at the end of World War II, we had pretty well solidified through Roosevelt's reforms and Truman's decision to go on with the United Nations the fact that America had to be involved in the world and we needed a government to protect competition, protect our natural resources, and protect decency in the workplace and promote social justice. And we rocked along for a while for another several decades until it was obvious that the Cold War was ending and that we had changed our economy again. We were in a global information age, so we had to have this fight all over again. And we had more diversity than ever before. When Hillary and I went to a grade school that had to be moved after 9/11, there were 600 kids in that school, and they came from over 80 different nations. So by then, you know, we've weathered a civil rights revolution, we've been through the women's rights revolution, and now we're dealing with how we're going to deal with this unprecedented religious, racial diversity, the whole gay rights issue, and what should be what is the role of government in the post-industrial era. And what does it mean in this age to define, defend, and expand the Union? Now, the people on the far right have their view, and they're pursuing it as they think they should. We can win that fight because if you look back in American history, every time we've had this fight, we have always decided to expand and defend the Union, our community. What does that mean? It means widening the circle of opportunity, deepening the meaning of freedom, and broadening the reach of community. That's what it means. It's what it's always meant. You go back to the beginning of the country. So I think you should feel optimistic. And you should be very grateful that, at least I am, that the American people, every time they get a clear shot and see what's really going on, they go forward. Now, you should also be, those of you that share my politics, you should be realistic about this. When I left office, about 2/3 of the people supported the general direction we had taken. The election of 2000 was 50-50 in part because they're much more closely divided if you can make the case, should we cut taxes or not, instead of what are the consequences of a tax cut. And they're much more divided on the cultural issues. As my Democrat friends from Oklahoma say, God, gays, and guns. And choice. So they're much more closely divided. And these kinds of things that this movie chronicles will abate as we move to a new consensus about what it means to be an American in the 21st century world. And you can't afford to let us make the wrong decision. Because the central insight of the framers of the Constitution was that a democracy is about not just majority rule, but about minority rights. It's about striking the balance between empowering the government to do what people need to do for themselves together, while absolutely preventing the kind of abuse of power chronicled in this film. That's really what this is about. Susan McDougal was a victim of abuse of power. She was simply a political pawn. And the unconscionable thing is that it went on for a long time, and the people who were supposed to prevent abuse of power said or did nothing about it. And there were many, many more like her. But now we got a belly full of that, and we know better. And so now we have to fight over the real issues. So I wanted to say that to you so you would understand. I don't wake up in the morning hating Ken Starr. I wake up in the morning feeling sorry for people who believe that they are in possession of the whole truth and that justifies their trampling other people. And I think you should too.